Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another online live stream. Cliff Ravenscraft here, and today you can tell I am not alone. I am joined by my wonderful friend, Megan Porta. Megan, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am super delighted. I had this idea that I'd love to collaborate with some folks that I've been blessed and honored to work with over the years, and you definitely were at the top of that list. And
Aw.
today you and I are going to do a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And the topic is how to manifest success and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what is it about manifestation that made that the first topic that came to your mind that you wanted to talk about?
I think I have so few people who love talking about this topic. And I know you do. So I thought that was the first thing I thought of. And I know I've shared this with you, Cliff, but I actually manifested you as a coach in my life, my business. It was an automatic, like, of course, this is what we should talk about.
So there are people from my previous faith background who hear the word manifestation. The first thing they think of is the movie The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
And they've maybe even drawn some pretty negative opinions about this idea of manifesting things.
Yeah.
So the number one I would say criticism is this idea that you could just think about something and you don't have to do anything. It just appears in your life. And I don't know if I think I've actually gone and watched the movie version of The Secret once or twice. I remember seeing Bob Proctor in it. But I hear people who have just recently watched it. They say, well, for example, they suggest that you could desire to have a Ferrari, and all you have to do is create a cardboard cutout vision board and put a Ferrari on it and put a lot of positive thought. And lo and behold, you wake up one morning, there's a Ferrari in your driveway.
Sitting
That's
there. Yep.
that's people's idea of manifestation. Is that your understanding of manifestation? And if not, how would you describe manifestation?
I mean, kind of. I do think that it can be as easy as that. I would say manifestation is using your thoughts to produce something in your reality. So yes, I mean, if you really wanted a Ferrari, you probably could manifest a Ferrari, but I think there's more to it than that. There's the strong desire for something, and then kind of like the unattached desire. So you're not like clinging to it and just like desperately wanting it. So I think there are elements that you need to think about. But yeah, I mean, if you want a Ferrari, Cliff, you should think about it and manifest it.
Well, ironically, I've never wanted a Ferrari, but I did have a client and I did manifest something. So the story real quickly is I had a client that had come here, spent an entire day with me. It's my Day with Cliff package, which, by the way, you can learn about at daywithcliff.com. Just throwing that out there. daywithcliff.com. Anyway, so he came over, and at the time, I had given my car to my daughter, who all three of my kids were in high school at the time, and she was driving them back and forth to school. Stephanie had our other vehicle, and my client was here, and we were going to go out to lunch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a car. Do I ask him if he wants to take, his rental car? I think he had a rental car that day. I'm not sure. But I remember Stephanie got back just in time, and I'm like, hey, you ready to go to lunch? Let's go to lunch. And I remember saying, it's a good thing Stephanie got back when she did, because we might have had to Uber to lunch. So this was a conversation that came up. And he's like, yeah, what? You don't have a car? I said, well, no, I gave my car to such and such. And, I work from home, and it's very rare that I need to drive anywhere. So if I need to drive a car, I rent a car. It's not a big deal. And I'm not a car guy. And he says, you're not a car guy? And he says, don't you have a dream car? And I'm like, well, no. But as soon as he asked that question, don't you have a dream car? I'm like, wait a second. Now that you asked that question, I guess I do have a dream car. Maybe two. One would be a Tesla. but quite frankly, it's not really a dream car of mine. I've never had a strong desire to have a Tesla. I think it would be cool to have a
Yeah.
Tesla, and I'd probably be bored with it in 2 weeks. But still, maybe that it's not practical. So no. However, from the time I was a kid, and I could tell you every year of my life, there's been one car that I would love to have, and it is a classic Volkswagen Beetle.
Mm.
And I continued to tell him about the smell of the car, the feel of the steering wheel, the just every aspect of this car. And he's like, "Dude, you should get." He goes, "What condition would it be in, and what color would you get?" And I'm like, "This would." And so I'm literally picturing this thing, and it's like, oh my gosh. And he says, how much would that be? And I said, well, in the condition that I want, it would start around 7,500 and might go all the way up to about 10, 12, $15,000, but probably around 7,500 to get the kind that I want. That, ironically, by the way, was the exact amount of money, 7,500,
What?
that he just spent for
Wow.
one day with me.
Oh, wow.
So I just made in one day what it would cost for me to have my dream car.
Wow.
So a couple of days later, I get this in the mail. This is
Uh,
an aluminum die-cast car, and it is a classic 1973 Volkswagen Beetle miniature. And he put this in a box, and he says, Cliff, thank you so much for helping me create a path to my dreams. Hopefully that you'll enjoy this gift, and it will open up the possibility for your dream to become reality as well. I sat with this on my car, and I played with it almost every day
hmm.
for 2 weeks. And then one day, right before I leave for the gym, I, I'm like, I wonder if how much it would be. It's been a long time since I've looked. I've never looked. So I went to Facebook Marketplace of all places, typed in classic Volkswagen Beetle. I found this 1974 Volkswagen Beetle. It was actually $9,000, and it said this is 1974. It's in mint condition. It has 5,500 original miles, and it was available less than 1 hour from my house
Oh,
from a car
wow.
dealer.
What?
And I'm like, no way. And I said, Stephanie, how much do you love me? And she's like, what do you want? And I said, this. And she goes, well, sure, if that's what you want. So I go to the gym, and I'm doing this. By that evening, Megan, that car was sitting in my driveway.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I didn't know it was that fast. Wow.
Yes.
That's so
So
cool.
so literally within weeks of having the thought,
Hmm.
it just instantly now some might say, well, that's not it just showing up in your driveway. Somebody didn't just drop it off and say, I'd like to give
Yeah.
you this car. Although, like you, I'm not so quick to say that that is outside of the realm of possibility.
Yep. Right.
Anyway,
But you did take
so
action too. I think that's part of most manifestation, that you have to take inspired action in order for the car to show up or whatever to show up to.
well, that is a question. I think that for maybe you and I, that would be a prerequisite, because that's how our belief system works.
Hmm.
Because we believe we must take some sort of action before it can
Ah, yeah.
show up. That's within our belief. So if you will, the God, the universe, whatever, this law that is taking place says, oh, well, okay, we will work within your framework
Yeah.
because you have a resistance of this just magically appearing
That is
out
a
of
great point.
nowhere.
Sure. But
So,
sometimes it does just appear out of nowhere. And then those times you're like, whoa, that was so weird. How did that happen? That happened.
so here's something. You and I have been working together. You're one of my coaching clients. We've worked together now. We're almost wrapping up our second full year of coaching
Yep.
together. You've told me before
Hmm.
that you said, Cliff, if I could just tell you sometime, one of these days, I'll tell you how I manifested you as a coach. And you kind of alluded to it in a conversation with me in the past. When we talked about creating this live stream, you said, hey, I can finally tell the full story of how I
Hmm.
manifested you as a coach. So you saw how long I took for my Volkswagen Bug story. By the way, I have more stories to tell. I don't know if you do, but go ahead and
I
share
have
your
so
full
many, but
story.
yeah, I love the story. So I had to write a few notes because it's been a while. Like you said, it's been 2 years since We started working together. And prior to that, so it was September of 2020, I just had this feeling like I had kind of reached a plateau in my business growth. And I just felt like I needed someone to help guide me outside of like to the next level. And it was just such a strong, intuitive, like, oh gosh, I need someone. It wasn't like something, I knew it was someone to guide me. And I didn't know if it was a coach, a mentor, a friend, a peer. I had no idea how this person would show up. I didn't know if it would be male or female. So after that strong feeling, I just started visualizing, which is one of my methods I use to manifest things that I want. And I just had this image, and I would do this almost daily, probably 5 times a week. So I would picture a person, and it was almost like a silhouette, like a black silhouette. There, it was not male, it was not female, it was just gender neutral. But I did know that this person had a few qualities. They were smart, they were driven, they were kind, they had experience being an entrepreneur. I think those were the main things. And I would just focus on like maybe a minute a day or so, just kind of see this person, feel their qualities, and just like, okay, I know you're coming into my life. I don't know how. I'm open to however you show up. So I did this from September 2020 till about March 2021. And then at that point, I was reading John Lee Dumas's book, Common Path to Uncommon Success. I had been a huge fan of his podcast for a long time. So I dug in his book, and I remember seeing your name, and it was just like it was so weird. It was like a little nudge, like, wait, I think I've heard his name before. I think John has mentioned his name on the podcast. And then I just went on like, okay, whatever. Like I had no idea who you were. I was clueless about who Cliff Ravenscraft was. So went on, finished the book. And then I would say a few weeks later, or maybe even sooner, I just had a nudge to look you up on my Apple Podcast player. So I looked up Cliff Ravenscraft, your podcast came up, the Cliff Ravenscraft show. And I remember seeing, because you have your picture of you there. And I was like, oh, I had no idea what you looked like. But I was like, oh, okay, that's what he looks like. Cool. And then I started digging into your episodes. I've told you before, I absolutely binge listened because all of your content is right up my alley. Just business, mindset, growing spiritually, business-wise, all of it. So I listened for hours and hours. And after that, that was when Clubhouse was really popular too. So I found you on Clubhouse. I think I'd heard that you, maybe on your podcast, you said, meet me on Clubhouse. So I would stalk your rooms, hoping that you wouldn't see me. I was like hiding at the bottom. And then I think I sent you an email. There was some prompt you put in one of your podcasts, like, hey, if this resonated with you, reach out to me, send me an email and put this in the title, in the subject. So I did. And I was really nervous. I'm like, he doesn't know who I am. He's never going to reply. And of course you did, because you're so nice. And you just sent me this lovely reply, like, thank you for listening. And I don't know if it was that email or the one after it, but you offered me a free coaching session. And at that point, it clicked. I was like, oh no, I think this is the person that I've been manifesting because of the way that I reacted to it. And I remember I was sitting in my living room, my husband was in there, and I started crying, Cliff. I was like so honored that you would offer that to me. And I just knew it. I was like, I think this is the person. And it turns out that you were, because maybe a week later we did our coaching call, and immediately you helped me break through some limiting beliefs with just like family stuff family stories that I had carried around with me for my whole life. And I just felt free of those. And literally ever since we started working together, I have grown exponentially in my business and in my just pursuit of happiness and living a peaceful life. And so many things have fallen into place for me. So yeah, that's kind of my story about how you came to be, how I manifested you.
Nice. I love that. Thank you so much. I remember those initial conversations and just how much, freedom there was for you to explore
Mhm.
things that it was only you holding self back from. So,
Yeah.
anyway, awesome. So, let's see here. Your first story, what is manifestation? What is the law of attraction? Let's talk a little bit about law of attraction and manifestation. How would you describe, or have you ever tried to describe to somebody this whole idea of law of attraction before?
I have, especially to people who who maybe aren't aware that they've experienced it. Because I think everyone's always using the law of attraction. We just don't necessarily know it. But when you try to explain it to someone, it's kind of hard to explain. But I would just say, like, you're bringing into your reality things that you focus on or things that you think about. Does that sound right? Or how do you describe it?
Well, it depends on how much time I have. I actually, so that I actually created Free the Dream Workshop, right?
Yep. Hmm.
And Free the Dream Workshop now has an entire session on everything is energy / law of attraction.
Ah,
So I have an entire
love
like
it.
1 hour session. And the way that I describe it, and I'll try to say this as briefly as possible, but first there's a foundational belief that everything is energy. When we go to a subatomic level, we
Hmm.
realize that everything is this empty space that is the potential of anything. And there's this observer effect that whenever something observes these potentials of these waveforms, that it collapses into the material world. And so everything, this can that I'm holding
Hmm.
is energy, this mouse is energy, and my arm is energy. So everything is energy, and everything vibrates at a different frequency. So that is the first foundational thing I try to get people to understand. Whether they believe it or not, that's not for me to say, but it's the basic understanding that really the same atoms that make up this can are the same atoms that make up my skin. It's just different frequency, and therefore it appears in different ways.
Hmm.
So lots of different structures. So if everything's energy, by the way, if one can agree that everything is energy, then what are thoughts? What are beliefs? What are emotions?
Hmm.
Well, those three things exist under the category of everything. So thoughts are energy, beliefs are energy, and actions are energy, and also our emotions are energy. In fact, emotions is energy in motion. So those are the things that I try to. Now, also, what I try to do is I try to talk about the law of vibration. And sometimes if I want to, I can actually show how tuning forks. So you could actually have two different tuning forks that are tuned to different frequencies. And if they're tuned to different frequencies, let's say they say this tuning fork over here is tuned to 430 hertz, and this fork here is tuned to 435 hertz. Well, if they're sitting next to each other and you clang on the one at 435, it will vibrate and the one on the left will do nothing.
Hmm.
But if you take the one at 435 away and bring up a second one that is also 430 hertz, and then you ding that one, it will vibrate and it will cause the other one to vibrate. And it's because those things are tuned to the same frequency.
Right.
Another Another thing that I like to think about is the fact that in the room that I'm in, and also in the room that you're in, which we're hundreds, if not thousands, of miles apart from each other, we each are in rooms where there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different radio signals or frequencies. That if we had a radio, let's say a shortwave radio, we could pick up all sorts of AM transmissions. We could pick up all sorts of FM radio transmissions, and we could do medium wave, short wave, and sorts of other shortwave radio band transmissions from all over the world. And that has nothing to say for all the other, like fire and EMS and all the other radio communications, the air traffic control. I mean,
Mm.
if the inside of the room, and it's all invisible. So energy and these energy waves and these radio frequencies are, everything is energy. So in essence, the law of attraction says everything has a vibration. And whatever vibration you are, so if I'm a 430 hertz um, emotional state vibration right now, I'm going to attract into my life other experiences,
Hmm.
thoughts, beliefs, or behavior or people who also vibrate at 430 hertz.
Yeah.
So,
That's so
so
cool, isn't
it,
it? Like to think
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So one of the things that I would say is that we are all master manifestors. It's like,
Hmm.
one of the things that I've heard people say, I want to teach you how to become a master manifester. And I don't think anyone needs training on that, because just like, have you ever taught anybody at school, let me teach you the 5 fundamental principles so that you can master the skill of gravity? Because
No.
we wouldn't want you to walk out your house and float off the surface of the planet. You've never had to be trained on how to work with gravity,
Hmm.
right? So, in essence, we all are manifesting. And if you read the book, The Four Agreements, he talks about the domestication of humanity and how we've accepted what's called the dream of the planet, and the thoughts and beliefs and the consciousness of those who came before. We were taught to adopt and vibrate at that societal level and at that cultural level and at that national level, and in some case even smaller communities. And so we have all of these vibrations within us, and therefore we are attracting what comes with that vibration. And if we are very, I told you this, it depends on how long I would go into the thing, but my feeling is that for a very long period of my life, before I was ever open to even understanding more about what this is, I used to have a pretty pessimistic, somewhat, just like, woe is me, Murphy's Law, whatever could go wrong is going to go wrong, blah, blah, blah. This always happens to me, that kind of thing. And what I realized looking back, wow, I manifested all of those things.
Hmm.
I kept focusing on those things. Those things vibrate at a certain frequency of experience. I attuned my frequency of my being to those, and therefore I consistently manifested more of the same.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I bucked the system, I went against the preconditioned ideas of my faith upbringing. They said, stay away from that new age stuff, stay away from that personal help stuff. They will teach you all sorts of weird, crazy stuff, and you'll be working with evil spirits and all this other stuff. But when I almost died in the hospital, realizing that my old way of believing and being in the world wasn't serving me well, I decided to go against all of that advice, and I began reading self-help and self-development books, which we'll get to Think and Grow Rich in a
Mhm.
bit. But once I started reading things like Think and Grow Rich and was open to this and eventually studied the law of attraction itself, then I began to say, wait a second, I wonder if I can consciously just change my energetic being, the actual frequency that I'm putting off into the world. Instead of negative, woe is me, I'm a victim, what if I actually saw life is working for me? I believe that all good things come out of every situation. I can always learn and grow and have a more positive outlook in life. And as soon as I began doing that, I noticed that more positive experiences
Mhm.
that matched that frequency came into my life. And then I started dreaming really wild, outrageous, outlandish dreams that set my faith at much higher levels than I ever dreamed of dreaming before. But not only that, but I had full confidence that those were possible and that they would happen. And anybody that's watched my journey over the last 17 years has witnessed one right after another being manifested right into
Hmm.
reality. That's how I would describe the law of attraction.
That was way better than my description, and I love it. I love everything you just said.
All right. You said you have other examples. I've been talking and dialoguing or monologuing for a little bit. Tell me another example of law of attraction for you.
Yeah, the first
Manifestation.
manifestation, one that comes to mind is a few years ago, probably 6 years ago. I We had this neighbor who I met at the park because I was bringing our boys to the park, and he mentioned that he and his wife bought an RV and that they were going to start traveling in it. And I was like, oh, that is so cool. I want to do that. And I got obsessed. I just had this really strong desire, and we were sick of our townhome. It was very small for us. We were growing out of it. We tried to sell it in the past and it just hadn't worked. And I said to my husband, we need to sell our home and find an RV and travel for the summer. And he thought I was absolutely crazy. But I got him on board and it just still seemed impossible. Like, who does this? This can't happen. But I had it in my mind that it was going to happen. And everything turned out so crazy. I don't think I've ever told you this story, but the way things unfolded, when I look back, I just can't believe how it happened. So we ended up selling our home really quickly, which every realtor was like, you can't sell this house. You're never going to make any money. We did. We found a buyer. She was great, really, really fast. We found an RV that was perfect for us. It was exactly what we wanted. And not only that, but my husband got laid off from his job like 2 days later. So suddenly we had no home, we had an RV, and we had a whole summer ahead of us. And I worked as an entrepreneur, I worked from home, so I could go anywhere. It was like magic. And I manifested that whole thing. And we were halfway through our trip, and my husband looked at me. We were in the Grand Canyon, and he was like, I cannot believe what you just did with your thoughts. This is crazy. So that was kind of the first like really big thing that I manifested that made me like, whoa, this is so cool.
That's
I love
awesome.
that story.
So I was recently listening to a dear friend of mine who I've been listening to his podcast for 17 years, and he was just recently talking about manifestation. And he has he's like, listen, I just want you to know I don't know anything about other than what I've heard. And and this is my initial reaction, which was very much similar to the reactions that I tell you that a lot of people have. But one of the things he goes, my concern is like some people just have a couple of experiences and they say, oh, well, it must be this law of attraction and therefore it must be true. Except for the fact that, we could talk about all of the negative experiences. We could talk about the placebo effect if we wanted to. And that is a scientifically proven case of how many people are healed because they actually have the
Hmm.
belief and expectation of healing because they are convinced in their own mind that they took the real medicine in a trial,
Yeah.
and therefore they had this strong belief that this medication would heal them, and in many cases it does. But it's not the medication that healed them; it was their expectation and the
Hmm.
vibrational expectation of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cases for this, but I personally have several. I don't want to go too much more into these stories, but I'll just say this. For anybody who's been watching my journey for over the years, if you know the story about the house that I'm living in right now, we call it the house that podcasting built. We moved
Oh.
into this house, what was it, 9 years ago now. But we could not even, I mean, there was no way we could afford the house that we live in right now when we made the decision to actually buy
Hmm.
this house. And through a number of things, it's just like, okay, we're going to have the faith. We're going all in on this. I know this sounds crazy. We're going to put $1,000 down, and we needed, I think, we need 61,000 more dollars after
Wow.
taxes, above and beyond where we already were financially. We had no clue how we were going to do it, but we just knew that we were going to do it. And then a very brief, shortened version of the story is we went on a cruise right after we signed the contract. And then we came home, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to come up with this money? We've got 9 months before this house is finished. Well, that led me to make a decision to do more of these podcasting A to Z courses that I was already doing.
Mm.
I was only doing 4 at a time. I decided to go to 6. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I don't have to limit myself to 20 students. I could work a little harder and serve 30 or even 40 students at a time. For during that 12-month period of time, I went from never making more than $250,000 a year. I made
Oh,
$750,000 that year.
wow.
We not only had, when the house closed, not only did we have the $61,000 after taxes above and beyond what we needed, we also had $38,000 to furnish every room in this home.
Oh, wow.
Prior to this home, we lived in a house that we built years ago, and everything we ever owned was always hand me down.
Mm,
So we didn't bring any hand me down with us. We furnished this entire
that's cool.
massive home. So that was manifested. Now, as soon as the house was built, we were also in a situation where houses weren't selling, and
Mhm.
they weren't, it's like, okay, it's not a big deal. We earned enough money. We wanted to be able to pay both mortgages for up to a year. That was in our mind. That's that. However, I'm like, this is going to work out. Well, we did some work on the house, put it on the market, and within 3 days, the house sold.
Mm,
We had $21,000 that we walked away from that house with, which is a miracle because we borrowed 103% when we built that
oh,
house.
wow.
We were still getting out of debt at the time. But anyway, so we walked away with $21,000, and that led to the next manifestation, which was a family trip to Europe for 2 weeks. And we literally purchased a airplane ticket from the United States to Edinburgh, Scotland, and we 2 weeks later booked a flight home for our family from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And we said, listen, here's what we want. We want to be able to go from here and get to here within 2 weeks. And we want to see Scotland, London, France, and Amsterdam. And we have no idea how we're going to do it, but we're buying these two tickets. So that was the first thing that we did, just on full faith. And then we just figured out the train system. And then we found a place to stay in each of the four places. And that's all the planning we did. Now, we made a list of all the things we dreamed that we would do while we were there, and we created that list. But we made no plans on what
Mm,
days we're doing anything. We just, when we get there, we'll figure things out. We don't know how we're going to get from the airport to here or there, but we just kept just going with the flow, and everything flowed perfectly.
oh, that's so amazing.
So much so that there were times where, like, listen, we are about 15 minutes from missing this train, and we have no clue where we're at. And somebody stops and says, "Hey, can I help you?" And I'm like,
Oh,
"Sure. Can you tell me this?" "Oh, you got to go fast. It's you see this. You have to get all the way to the end of the building, turn left, and then turn left again. But you've got to run." And it's like boom, and
wow.
it's just that kind of stuff was happening, and it was the most laid back, relaxed trip of our life. We're in 5 different countries in 2 weeks, and had no clue how to transport ourselves anywhere, but just trusting that it'll all work out somehow. And we
That's
made it
cool.
home. So,
And so you know how you now have this amazing story to share about it too, and the experience of it. That's a really cool story. I had never heard that one.
yep. And there's so many more, but let's move
I
on
know. I know.
because so many people, the people who are skeptics, they're going to continue to be skeptics, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you, at least if you are still tuned into this episode, then you have some interest in what we're talking about. And I would recommend that rather than having and sticking with a preconceived idea or a conditioned way of believing this, maybe look to see if there aren't a reason why millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people around the world believe in this and are experiencing story after story after story. And it might actually help you understand some of the things that have shown up in your past and consistently show up over and over again as far as circumstances that you'd like to avoid. If you only knew how you might actually be responsible for those things keeping coming up, and how you could actually break the cycle by breaking the focus and the energetic output that you put out into the world, it'd be worthy of looking into.
Yes.
And let's see here. So let's see next. Okay, so Megan, you talked about vision boarding, or at least visualization,
Hmm.
what are some of the things that you've learned to become more effective in your manifestations?
Um, to be more effective. So I think just being aware of this, like everything we're talking about, being aware that thoughts have that energy that you talked about, emotions have the energy. Being aware that when you have low energy or like bad energy, that can bring in the bad energy. Just I think that awareness is huge. I went on for a long time in my life as well where I was probably putting off awful, like really bad energy vibes, and bad things would come to me, bad people, like negative people and issues, problems. So I think just the awareness is huge. And then um, also to be more effective, gratitude. Just I always start my day with gratitude. I have so much to be grateful for, and I just try now to even the bad things, like the perceived bad things that happen to me, I always try to turn it around and like, okay, what's the good in this? And to just be grateful for everything. I think that really helps to manifest the good things. Um, let's see what else. Just being around positive people, to spending time with people who lift you up and make you feel good and don't bring you down. They're not complaining all the time. That's been really important for me, just to be like, oh, this person probably is not the vibe that I want to be around. I don't necessarily want to complain about people and things in my life all the time. Um, yeah, and just I think those are kind of the main things that I try to focus on a daily basis.
I love all of that. When for me, when back in 2015 and 2016 is when I was really heavily into this Tony Robbins materials that I had gone all in on. So Stephanie and I went to Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within in June of 2015, I believe. And that weekend introduced us to a lot of techniques and strategies that we didn't know were related to the law of attraction and stuff like that. Obviously, Tony knew about all of this stuff, and he goes into great depth on these sorts of things in what's called his Date with Destiny program, which is a 6-day program that he does. But at UPW, he introduced us to this idea of your being in control of your emotional state and how vitally important it is that you
Mm.
choose how you want to feel, and that if you choose to feel low emotional states, it blocks you from your creativity. And if you choose more positive emotional states, then you are more likely to receive your access to your creativity, inspiration, and maybe even divine guidance, if you will. Now, he did not use any language related to what's called the map of consciousness or
Mm.
levels of consciousness back then. But today, I've done a lot of study on these things. And if you want, you could actually read a book called The Map of Consciousness Explained by Dr. David R. Hawkins. Incredible book. Definitely out there when it comes to a different way of seeing the world and spiritual paths and stuff like that. It might stretch some folks. It would have stretched me, a couple of years ago to read that book.
Mhm.
So I do put that little warning there, but it's an incredible thing. And you could actually even do a Google search, map of consciousness, Dr. Hawkins, and then go to the images and look for the one that looks like a little bit of an upside down triangle, and it shows guilt and shame and apathy and the anger and desire and pride and all of these little lower level energies that are below 200, and it'll show you that that's a victim or abuser mindset. And then anything starting at 200, which I think is courage, and then it goes up to appreciation and gratitude and love and connection and hope and courage. Anyway, it goes up and up and up. And the higher you go, so Tony's like, listen, as long as you will choose how you feel, and you can actually choose how you feel any moment by what are you focused on, what meaning are you associating to what you're focused on. So what does it mean, this thing that you like, this situation just happened? Okay, well, what does that mean? You get to choose what it
Mhm.
means. You can, it's like, I can't believe this has happened to me, these people always do this.
Mhm.
Or you could say, oh my gosh, This may be a sign from God, the universe, to help me become aware that there's something that I might want to change about my life to where I no longer experience this. What can I do to improve my way of being in the world and operating so that I don't attract this kind of stuff in my life? And I didn't have all that language and understanding. But anyway, controlling your emotional state, which is what you've already stated. I love that. The other one is the power of meditation.
Mm.
And also, I follow Abraham Hicks a lot now, the teachings of Abraham Hicks,
Mhm.
which I used to be afraid to talk about publicly, but I'm not anymore. So I would encourage anyone and everyone who's really interested, forget about the secret. Just go straight to the source of that material and read the book called Law of Attraction by Esther and Jerry Hicks, which is an introduction to the teachings of Abraham Hicks. I will tell you, it is message a channeled message from uh, universal consciousness, or a conglomerate of metaphysical beings. So it's a little out there. Actually, it's way out there. It's actually not just that. Literally, it's out there.
Literally, yeah.
But this is a great book. It's called the Law of Attraction, and then there are many other books by Esther and Jerry Hicks that continue on this. But if you only knew the power of non-resistant thought, and non-resistant thought is to not resist what currently is, to keep pushing back and wishing this weren't the situation. I wish I wasn't experiencing this financial lull in my business. I wish my kids weren't saying and experiencing and doing these things. I wish these people wouldn't do that. And what happens is your energy, your focus is on what you don't want, and that's the vibration, is what that experience is. And law of attraction says, okay, I get it, I'll bring you more of other things that will resonate on that frequency. And so
Hmm.
you create more and more and more of the same. But if you could instead kind of just like, hey, if you can't see the situation as being better than it is, basically, if you can't visualize in your mind and see your kids behaving or doing or acting differently, if you can't see in your mind things just completely shifting for you financially and all this other stuff, if you're having a hard time, what I love about Abraham Hicks, she's like, take a nap, literally,
Hmm.
or just give up for the rest of the day. Start over in the morning. Get a
Yeah.
full night's sleep and start with a fresh stretch. But be mindful of where you let your mind go as soon as you wake up, or as soon as you come out of that nap, or as soon as you come back from that meditation.
Mm.
And oftentimes she's like, listen, it's very clear that as soon as you experience something you don't want, she talks about launching this rocket of desire of what you do want. The universe now knows that you want it. It's ask and it will be given. This is a biblical principle. And so just know that the universe knows it. The only thing that might stand in the way is your resistance to it actually happening. So sometimes the best thing you could do is just go feel good about something else if you can't feel good about that situation, and allow that thing to just naturally start working its way back towards you.
Mm. I love
So
that.
certainly a lot there. All
Yeah.
right. Let's see here. The next thing that we had on our list here, we wanted to talk about the fact that we both love Think and Grow Rich. And
Hmm.
in fact, when we talked about doing a live stream together, you're like, hey, we could do a topic on this or this or this. And this is actually a separate topic, but seeing as though really Think and Grow Rich is a lot about the law of attraction. The very first chapter, the very first words in the first chapter is truly thoughts are things. And then it's all about everything is energy. So, given that Think and Grow Rich is a great book also to start on this, what are your top two favorite parts of the book Think and Grow Rich?
This is nearly impossible for me to answer because I love so much about the book. So I kind of randomly just picked two things I loved. One is a quote that I have in my living room upstairs on a little plaque, and that is, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." That is in the book, and when I read this book, that concept just got me. I was like, "Wait, what?" And I think that's kind of what the whole concept of the book is about. So that would be my number one like quote that I would choose from the book. And then, oh, I actually have my book here. I don't know about you, but I have like highlighted
Oh boy, yeah.
pages and like dog-eared pages. So I picked one of my favorites here, and um, I mean, I could read so many of these, but this one's really good. So this talks about ideas, and he says that most ideas are stillborn and need the breath of life injected into them through definite plans of immediate action. The time to nurse an idea is at the time of its birth. Every minute it lives gives it a better chance of surviving. So an idea is just an idea until we actually act on it. And the faster we act, the greater chances of success for us. And then just like how fears can so often be what holds us back from achieving successes that we want. So fear of being criticized, fear of failing, all those fears that we go through as entrepreneurs, like everyone else is better than me. Who do I think I am? And then we pause. But if we just acted right away on those things that we knew would create success for us, then we would have better chances of achieving them. So I want to know what your two favorite parts are, Cliff.
I love that. By the way, at first, I just want to thank you because as many times as I've read that book, that saying has always stood out to me. But it never so much that I remember making such a huge point to really think about it in the way that you've brought it up into my mind today. So, what can you reread that actual quote about a dream is stillborn and just
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
for life to be breathed into it? Because that mental image is such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful thing, and knowing what you and I know today about dreams and how we literally give life to those experiences is powerful. So, would you read that again?
Yes. Most ideas are stillborn and need the breath of life injected into them through definite plans of immediate action. The time to nurse an idea is at the time of its birth. Every minute it lives gives it a better chance of surviving.
Oh
So
man,
powerful.
wow, that is incredible. I do remember that in the book, and it's so potent, and it's something that I know to be true. There are so many ideas that I've had over the years that I've allowed to wither, and
Mhm.
any idea that I've ever breathed life into and remained focused on and took that inspired action towards, uh, quite frankly, there's never been anything I ever truly dreamed that I wanted to create that I didn't actually create in this world. There have only been a few rare occasions that where I had a dream or an idea, I breathed life into it. I saw it coming to life, and in the progression of turning it into reality, only through the process did I learn. And it's like, wait a second, I don't actually want this anymore.
Mm,
And whether it be that I still have some unconscious or subconscious beliefs about what might happen if I get there, and I don't, so there's either some work to be done on my belief system underneath, or it's just like, wait a second, I realized that dream actually isn't my dream. It's a dream that I was taught that I should have, and that it
mm.
was responsible to have that dream, and this is why you should be doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, I finally am going to put some action towards this, and I begin to visualize it, only to realize it's like, wait a second, I'm creating somebody else's dream. This isn't mine.
Yeah, that's powerful too, because it might be somebody else's dream that they wanted to breathe life into, and you're like handing it back to them, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to share my two, but you know that I have a podcast called the Train with Cliff Audio
Mhm.
Journal Podcast. Just like you could go to daywithcliff.com, by the way, you could also go to trainwithcliff.com. And Train with Cliff is an audio journal podcast that I've been doing since I think maybe November 2018. Anyway, it is a podcast where I give behind the scenes look into my personal, professional, and even my spiritual life sometimes. And there was a series of podcasts. Are you aware that I was doing a Think and Grow Rich series in the Train with Cliff audio journal?
A long time ago, right? I think I
Yeah.
listened to part of that, but I have not listened to the whole series.
So if you're interested, if you're a Train with Cliff Audio, I know you are, but
Yes.
if anybody else out there is a Train with Cliff Audio Journal subscriber, I can give you a link to an archives page. There are 29 episodes
Oh.
of this podcast where I talk about just the first 9 chapters of the book.
Oh,
I'm not
wow.
even finished covering it. So there are 29 episodes. Now, to give you off the top of my head, and I didn't think about this ahead of time, I did write the question, what are the top 2 favorite things about Think and Grow Rich, but I knew that I would want to come up with it off the top of my head.
Hmm.
So the 2 things that stand out to me, number one is the mastermind group. Just once I learned about the power of a small group of people who have decided to come together and work with you in a spirit of harmony where every single member of the group is committed to the success of every other member in the group. That was mind-blowing.
Hmm.
And I'd had experience in mastermind groups before without knowing that that's what they were. But once I got intentional about the whole idea of we're going to get together and I'm only going to collect a number of people who resonate with the kind of life that I want to create for myself, and I don't want people who are going to judge me. It's not necessarily that I don't want people to, uh, you know, poke questions and stuff like that, or whatever. It's just I don't want people who are like, Cliff, will you just stop it with always wanting more kind of. I didn't want
Hmm.
those kind of
Yeah.
people, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So I wanted people who would work with me in a spirit of harmony, where everything that we're doing is in support to an encouragement of whatever it is you feel called to create in this world. And in October of 2010, Pat Flynn was one of my clients at the time. We had been working together, had a lot of amazing conversations, and he had just read Think and Grow Rich, and we were talking about the mastermind principle. And I said, "Hey, are you in a mastermind group?" He says, "No." "Are you?" I said, "No." So, "Would you like to be in one with me?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we started that together, and we have been meeting. Pat Flynn and I have been meeting every week since October 2010.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's powerful.
And the way that my life has transformed as a result of this mastermind group with Pat Flynn, and eventually Michael Stelzner from Social Media Examiner joined us, and Ray Edwards and Mark Mason and Leslie Samuel. But the 6 of us have been meeting together for well over a decade, all 6 of us. And it's just the most incredible thing that's happened in my life, upgrading my peer group to people who have consistently been through every phase of everything that I've been going on ever since the last 13 years of my life.
Wow.
So it is incredible. So the mastermind principle, so much I loved it. I was going to write a book on mastermind groups, and now that these chat GPT things exist in the world, AI tools, I will finally write that book. However, before all of the AI tools came out, I decided, I'm not going to write a book. I'll just do a podcast. And by the way, you can find this at upgradeyourpeergroup.com. It's available for free. 7 episodes, all about everything I could teach you about mastermind groups, available for you over at upgradeyourpeergroup.com.
I've
All
learned
right.
so much from you about mastermind groups, so I'm glad that that called to you.
And not only that, but you've actually started your own mastermind groups.
Yes, I have. Yep, and they're very successful as well.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. And my second favorite aspect of
Mhm.
the Think and Grow Rich book, the power of auto suggestion. So there's an entire
Mm.
chapter of Think and Grow Rich on auto suggestion. And when it introduced the concept to me that my subconscious mind has the ability, if programmed correctly, to get me massively different results in my behavior and also the way that I think and in the way that I feel. And so, real quickly, for anybody that doesn't have an understanding of auto suggestion and subconscious mind, the idea is that one might make a suggestion. So, for example, if you go, let's just say you've been suffering from a persistent cough and maybe a light fever for several, let's just say for 2 weeks, and it's been going on and on and on, and nothing you've tried over the counter is working and all this other stuff. But let's just say you go to the doctor's office And chances are you are likely going to sit in a waiting room for a very lengthy period of time, and then you'll be called back to one of the very few rooms, and you're going to sit for a very lengthy period of time. Psychologically, this is all brilliant, and it's to help you understand that this person that you're about ready to see is an expert. Their time is valuable. They know what they're doing, and eventually they're going to come in and ask you what's going on. They're probably wearing a white coat, which you've, without even knowing this, you've been hypnotically conditioned from the time you were a kid through the television shows and movies that you've watched that people with a white coat should be trusted, and that you should believe what they say. And so therefore, now you sit down and tell what's going on to this person, and because they have a white coat, and because you've gotten their, such valuable time, they listen to you, and they said, oh, okay, here's what you need to do. Go and take this and do this, and you'll be fine within probably 3 to 5 days. Call me if there's anything, if this is still going on a week from now. And so because of that, this person just made a suggestion. If you do this, you will be well. All right, that is a suggestion. Now, anytime somebody suggests something to you, you actually hear what they're saying, and your hearing of it is representing to yourself what you just heard. So what you've just done is you've taken their suggestion, and by thinking about it and accepting it, you've actually turned it from a suggestion to an auto suggestion. So auto just means self. So, for example, somebody could write a biography, but if they write an autobiography, they're doing it about themselves. So somebody can make a suggestion, but it doesn't actually enter into you until you've turned it into an auto-suggestion. So this is what auto-suggestion is, and this is how that placebo effect works if you were to go and study the placebo effect. And in many cases, there are doctors in their white coats that says, here, try this. This is a new thing. It's just come out on the market. This will heal you. And some of those things are not medicine. They're nothing more than a sugar pill. But ironically, sometimes as much as 50% can be healed just because of the suggestion which they turned into auto-suggestion. So when I began to discover this, then it helped me understand the world of hypnosis and self-hypnosis and altered states of consciousness, and that opened up a whole different set of rabbit trails for me. So auto-suggestion was one of my, it's my second, I don't know that I can rank them one or two, but those are my two that came to mind instantly.
I kind of knew that you would pick mastermind. And the auto-suggestion doesn't surprise me either, because we've chatted about that in recent calls too. So good picks, solid picks.
Awesome. All right. So one last question for you, and we'll wrap up on this. Megan, what is your favorite lesson that you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, so many lessons, right? Like, I mean, I could go on forever. This could be a whole entirely other episode, but I think just the concept that we kind of talked about, you have to act on your dreams and inspiration and the ideas that come to you. And also you have to do it consistently. So you don't just act once, you have to be consistent in order to find success and to achieve those desired freedoms you want in your life. And that is something that is in my mind all the time, is act and be consistent. And I've learned from not acting and not being consistent that success doesn't come from that. So I just always try to keep that lesson at the top of my mind.
I love it. And like you said, we could do an entire other session on lessons learned as an entrepreneur. And I'm sure that you and I will maybe collaborate on some more live stream and podcast content in the future. So I'm just going to pick one. And again, I didn't think of anything ahead of time, didn't write anything down. So I'm just going to pick what immediately came to me after I asked you the question. And that is, life is created. And as an entrepreneur, I recognize it more easily than when I was not an entrepreneur. When I was an employee, so many times what I was working on a majority of my life was on fulfilling the processes and systems of other people's business and what their goals were and what their aspirations were and what they wanted to create. And I was paid and compensated, sometimes well, to participate in what they wanted to create. Whereas in my own business, ever since I've been self-employed, I recognize that, wow, I can create whatever I want.
Mm,
I can create whatever product I want. I can create whatever service I want. I could get bored and completely shut down what I don't want anymore and create something new and actually succeed at it. And I could do that and reinvent myself over and over and over again. And so because I have had so many thoughts that I've been able to turn into things that actually exist in the materialized world, I have come to understand. And as an entrepreneur, given the fact that a majority of my waking hours are devoted to work related things, I've noticed that the work related things, what I desire to create, those things are the things that I create. And I turn thoughts into things. And so life is created. And you and I and everyone, even if you're not an entrepreneur, but I learned it as a favorite lesson of being an entrepreneur, when given the freedom to do anything and everything that I want in any given week. And I've been an entrepreneur, self-employed for 17 years. No boss ever, not one day ever tell me what I should or should not do with my time, effort, and energy. And that absolute freedom to put that time, effort, and energy on anything, and then to actually think of something on a whiteboard and live it 90 days later,
mm.
mind blowing and awesome. Megan, it is an honor to connect with you. Where can people find you and what you've got going on in the world?
Mostly, well, I have a food blog, pipandebby.com, but also the entrepreneurial side, you can go to eatblogtalk.com. That's my podcast for food bloggers, and I'm on Instagram at eatblogtalk.
Awesome. And I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. If you are a blogger or an entrepreneur who wants to learn how to succeed more in online business, Megan has a lot of great content in helping you expand your beliefs about what's possible for you, especially on the blogging side of things.
Mhm.
She's got things worked out there that, quite frankly, this talky talk guy that doesn't like the righty right very much. I'm not going to be able. I'm not going to give you all of those insights, but Megan has them over at. Did you say it's eatblogtalk.com?
Yes. Yep.
And it's in audio podcast format. So what's not to love? I'll put a link to her podcast and everything else she mentioned here in the show notes. Megan, thank you so much. Until next time, we encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Thank you.
Mindset Answer Man.
All right, I'm stopping that recording. Thank you, Megan. By the way, real quickly, during our call, we had Michael say, "This is a great interview, Cliff." Michael, thank you. And we also did have D-Lynn came in and said, "Abraham Hicks." Yes.
Nice. Yes.
Awesome.
Someone knows
So
me with Abraham Hicks.
that's
That's so
awesome.
great. That was so fun. It went so fast. What a fun chat. Thank you. That was amazing.
It is always a blessing. And so let me go ahead and hit end broadcast. Bye, everybody. We'll see.